Hello there, and welcome to 06880, the podcast. I'm Steve Parrish, and my guest today is Dan Woog. Welcome, Dan.
Glad to be on the show. I've heard a lot about it.
We decided to do a little role reversal today, and Dan and I would have a bit of a conversation about him and his career, and quite a bit of focus on 06880, the blog. So let's get started, because I got a lot of questions for you, Dan.
Sure.
Native Westporter.
Absolutely.
Staples High School grad.
1971.
Brown University.
1975.
Yeah. And I guess I take it that you really got interested in journalism while you were at Staples.
I did. I was one of those kids who always loved to write. Came fairly easily to me, and I enjoyed having people read what I wrote. As a sophomore at Staples High School, I went down to the Westport News office when it was a bustling, thriving newspaper in Brooks Corner, and asked there was a weekly column written by a Staples student called Up at Staples. I said I would like to take it over when the senior graduated. I forget what the process was, but I got that column, and for 2 years, I was able to write about anything having to do with Staples. It was an active time, Vietnam War. There were all kinds of music concerts at the school, open campus. We were in the process of starting the Staples governing board to govern ourselves. So there's a lot to write about, and that was where it all began. And
then it continued. Am I right that you continued to write later for the Westport News?
I did. I kept writing for the Westport News, right out of college. I became the sports editor there when we had a robust 8 to 10 page sports section twice a week. Had a column called Woog's World, or Woog's World, if I pronounce my own name correctly. And it was print journalism, was where it's at in not just Westport, but in communities all around the country.
And then and later, of course, you got into coaching.
I did. I played soccer at Staples. I was not a star. To my, I guess, credit, of the 11 starters on our team, on state championship team, all 11 went on to become college captains.
Wow.
So it was no shame to be on the bench. But when I got back to Westport, didn't intend to come back, but when I came back after college and got a job here, I went to the coach, Albie Leffler, said I would like to get involved in soccer. How can I do that? He suggested I start a youth team. There were no youth travel teams at that point. I coached an under-14 team when I was about 6 or 7 years older than the players. That led to the founding of the Westport Soccer Association, and I never looked back.
Wow. So one thing I came across that I didn't know, and I think maybe a lot of people don't know, you've written 17 books?
I have. About 6 or 7 of them are on LGBTQ topics. Wrote the first 2 books on gay male athletes. Wrote the first one on gay issues in education. Wrote about straight allies, the importance of straight allies. I wrote several soccer books. Ghost wrote a couple. And 17 books. The last one I wrote, the one that I really like the most, is a memoir of all my years in youth soccer coaching.
Right. Now, is that 2 volumes?
Nope, 1 volume called We Kick Balls.
Okay, and I'm thinking of a different.
And it's stories about all the stuff I've gone through in soccer. The highs, the lows, traveling to Europe with teenagers, deaths of players, including a suicide. And it's fun. It's a memoir. The other one that I really liked was a history of Staples High School called Staples High School, 120 Years of A-plus Education. And it goes back to the founding in 1884 by Horace Staples. It goes through the growth of public education in the United States. Staples went as it boomed, as it moved from Riverside Avenue. And like all the others, except for We Kick Balls, it's out of print.
Is that right? Let's talk about 06880.
Sure.
Am I right? 2009? Is that when it was launched?
2009, March of 2009.
How'd you come up with the idea?
It ties in with the Westport News and the fact that at that point, even 16 years ago, I saw that local journalism was on the way out. The Westport News was dying, withering on the vine, and I wanted to continue to have a voice in town affairs. And I mentioned it to someone, and she said, "Why don't you start a blog?" I said, "What's a blog?" And she gave me the outlines. I said, "I don't know how to do that." I found WordPress, the blogging platform, and over the course of a weekend, I sort of taught myself the basics of it, how to write, how to post, how to include graphics, that sort of thing. And the next couple of days, I posted my first blog story. It said, "Here I am. I'll be covering stories in Westport. I hope you like it." And very luckily, I sent it to people that I knew, and one of them was involved in the Staples PTA, and she sent it to her mailing list. So within a day, I had 100 subscribers. I said, "Uh-oh, I better continue this."
So what's that number today?
I have 13,000 daily subscribers who get it either once a day or whenever I post, and another 6,000 or 7,000 a day who click on without subscribing. So it's about 20,000 unique visitors a day.
That's a pretty remarkable success story.
And of course, this is a town of 28,000. Of course, a lot of them, some of them don't live here. I have sort of three buckets of readers. The new residents, fairly new, who, want information on the town. The people who have lived here a long time and feel very invested in it. And the third bucket is people who used to live here and have moved away, or their kids live here and they want to find out what's going on with them. And some of them, lived here 30 or 40 years or 40 years ago and still feel connected to the town. So I have to keep those three sets of readers happy. Right. Nobody's going to be happy with everything, but I keep them in mind all the time.
So it seems obvious today, but how did you go about choosing the name 06880?
I have no clue. I didn't do a trademark search or anything like that. It seemed to encompass what I did. This is the town, here's the zip code. I don't know how I came up with the tagline, "Where Westport Meets the World," but it has worked really well because it gives me carte blanche to write about anything having to do with Westport.
Right.
People, events, trends, looking back, photos, people who can't park well. Anything that has to do with Westport, I write about it. And, sometimes it's a direct connection. Sometimes it's a connection through someone who used to live here. Did a little short write-up today about the fact that Satva, the mattress company that has an outlet in Westport and whose CEO lives in Westport, they have been named the mattress provider and bedding provider for the 2028 Olympics. Who knew there was such a thing? Who cares? But, it's where Westport meets the world.
Right. And you're a 501c3.
I am. It is.
And what's the reason for that as opposed to some other structure?
The reason is a couple reasons. Number one, I wanted to have a board of directors. I wanted to have people who could help me advance 06880. It is a way, 06880 exists entirely on contributions. And this is a way for people to have matching contributions, to get funds from foundations and things like that. And we have a mission statement, and the mission is it's a 501c3 under the journalists portion of the IRS code. And it's a way, our mission statement is to inform, educate, and help bring the community together. And that's really, I think, in many ways what 06880 does. It's stories, but it's also a way to sort of build community through both information and the interactivity of the comment section. People can find a home there, they can find a place in the community, and that fits in with the IRS code.
I'm going to come back to the comments in a minute, but how do you go about deciding what is going to go in your post each day or multiple times a day?
Yeah, that's a great question. I keep my ears open. You know, if we're talking normally, Steve, and you mentioned something, and, you know, we're at an event at the library or a party or something, you know, most people say, oh, interesting.
Right.
I think, wow, I wonder if there's a story there. I wonder if this person has a backstory. I wonder if, you know, they mentioned something I don't know about. If I dig a little deeper, will I find out about the Fair Rent Commission? Will I find out about the blight ordinance? Will I find out about this person's, what got them to Westport or why they started their business here? I get pitched a lot.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah, I you know, for people who want me to do something on, I started a new business, you know, can you do a story on me? Well, tell me what's interesting about your business, what's innovative about it, what's new, what's different. Not just that you're here, what got you here? Why are you on Main Street and not in Saugatuck? Who are your customers and who are you looking for? So I also get pitched a lot to promote things that are not in Westport. You know, once I start doing Fairfield, once I start doing Norwalk or Wilton, then why not Easton? Why not, you know, Stamford? So I'm very conscious of my 06880 brand, and I tell them, you know, sorry, it's a great story, but it's not for me. 90% of them understand. 10% think I'm a jerk, but 10% of my readers think I'm a jerk anyway.
So I asked my wife this morning, if you could ask Dan one question, what would it be? And here's was her question. How does he find time to do all this?
It's a good question. Time management. I've always been pretty good at that. I'm very productive in the early morning, so I get up early, do a lot of writing then. The phone doesn't ring, and then the rest of the day is, you know, the stuff that you don't plan for, the phone calls, the emails, and I do answer every email. But it's, you know, it's a constant juggling act. I've got a story for tomorrow. All of a sudden, something else happens. Got a story for tomorrow, and all of a sudden, the person says, "You know what? I rather that you don't write that." And I go to the Y to swim in the middle of the day. That's my me time. Clears my head. Feel good the rest of the day.
Do you still play soccer?
I do not. Played an alumni game a few years ago. We play every Thanksgiving. Woke up the next morning, couldn't move. Went to the chiropractor. She did her thing. I felt better. I said, "What is it?" She looked at me. She said, "You're getting old." Thanks a lot.
So, how, if at all, has it changed in terms of the articles you work on or are pitched on from 2009 until today?
It has both changed and not changed. I think some things are always the same. Questions about housing, development, all the stuff that goes on, the schools and all that. I think I have become a little less black and white. I think I see things in more nuanced terms now than I used to.
Why do you think that is?
I think I've broadened my horizons by talking to more people, by understanding that whatever brings you here, you're here now, and you've got your perspective, and it's you're not all the same. Everybody, you look around, you see a fairly white town, a fairly liberal town, fairly wealthy town. But there's much more beneath that surface. I've realized there are much more. There are many more Trump people here than most people think. They're not always afraid to out themselves, but they have their reasons, and they're not black and white reasons. Mm-hmm. I think I have also. In terms of the things I've covered, I think I've become broader in the stories that I cover. I still miss a lot. There are things that the Westport Journal does very well that I don't do particularly well, and they fill a really important niche in the town. When I started, I worried that I was going to run out of ideas. And I know now that I never will.
Right. Do you ever have a piece sort of on the shelf in case you wake up one morning and say, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm going to write about today," and I've got that piece on.
I try to work 3 or 4 days ahead. I try to have the weekend pieces where there are fewer eyeballs. I try to have them be less important, controversial, deep. But I still look ahead and I still a couple of days out will say, what am I going to do?
Right.
Then somebody emails me an idea. Somebody emails me an opinion piece. Something happens and I think,
So for those who might be thinking about pitching something to you, are there certain standards or criteria that I know you have a word count. I know that from personal experience. But are there other things that sort of you'd say, okay, this doesn't fit other than the Westport connection?
Yeah, another good question. I think I will ask somebody who has an idea, but an unformed idea, why should I care? And why should my readers care? They don't have to sit up and say, wow, about every story, but they do have to be invested in reading beyond the first paragraph. Not how will it change readers' lives, but how will it give them an insight into the town?
Right.
And a lot of times people take that direction and they go with it. If they've got a story about, some housing story, it's, just, I don't want to hear that you're mad about this tree that got cut down across the street from you. But what does it say about Westport? What does it mean about our environment? What does it mean about real estate? What does it mean about the people who are moving into Westport today and tomorrow? I don't care about the tree. I care about the story behind the tree.
Right. A minute ago, you mentioned the comments. How, if at all, has the nature and tone of the comments changed from 2009 until today?
Well, from 2009 to 2013, I allowed anonymous comments, and they were all over the place. It became vicious. People, they're keyboard warriors. They can say whatever they want and hide behind anonymity. And I am a huge believer in the First Amendment, and that was my answer. It's people, First Amendment, say what you want. And somebody said to me, Dan, that refers to the public space. You're running a private blog, and the comments there sometimes become so toxic that it's your brand, and your brand is being sullied. So in 2013, I instituted a new policy that you had to use your full real name, and that changed things pretty dramatically. All of a sudden, the comments got more thoughtful. People were less quick to hurl insults or to make ad hominem attacks on people. I spent a ton of time moderating comments because there are still, there's still vitriol. There's still people who attack others. There are people who try to sneak in using fake names. And I spend an enormous amount of time moderating the comments. Having said that, I think the comments section is really important. It gives people a forum that they otherwise wouldn't have. I know that people who never comment read them to sort of get the pulse of the town. And I know there are people who never read the comments. All they do is read the stories.
Right. Dan Yankelovich, I don't know if you know of him, a famous public opinion researcher, told me one time, we were talking about employee communications, and he said, your employees understand they don't get a vote, but they do want to have a voice. And I think that is one of the beauties of 06880 is while people do get a vote on certain things in Westport, they really want to have a voice. And your comment section does that, gives them that voice.
Thanks. I do appreciate that. And our opinion pages, I post opinion pieces a couple times a week, are open to all. They really are. I want them to be. I've had a couple of people who say, you don't post this point of view. And my answer to that is I can't post it if I don't get it. If nobody sends it to me, right, I can't magically make it appear. So, if you're out there and you want something posted, send it to me. I might say no, it's not appropriate. But I really do want all forms of voices to be heard.
Seems to me that there are times when an issue takes on almost like a life of its own, and it's an ongoing thing. How do you decide, okay, enough is enough?
That's a great question, and I struggle with that all the time. I do not want to be the guy who pours gasoline on the fire. At the same time, I don't want to be the guy to mix metaphors who, takes a sheet and covers something up. Sometimes I will let something go and continue because it seems a lot of people want to talk about it. At some point, it becomes repetitious. It's nothing new. It's just the same voices saying the same thing. And other times, I'll realize pretty quickly that, okay, there's no there there. It's an editorial judgment. Right. I don't always make the right ones. And that's why people email me.
So 2013, you changed the policy in the comments. From 2013 until today, has the nature, the tone, the content, you mentioned they're more thoughtful than in a lot of ways than they were in 2009 when you first launched. But I'm interested if there's been a change in sort of the public discourse as reflected in your comments.
I don't think so. I think Westport has changed. The COVID people, all the people who came here, the 700 people who came from 2020 on, I think they're fantastic. I think they are creative. They're sharp. They moved here for the right reasons. They wanted everything that this town offers, and they wanted to get involved. I think, and I can't put my finger on it, but I think their view of the town is different from people who've lived here, even before 2020, and that's probably reflected in the comments, probably reflected in the way they see their schools, the way they see the town government, just because they don't have any history here.
Right.
I try to provide that history as much as I can, but one of the things that strikes me is everybody thinks that the Westport, when they moved in, was the golden age. I grew up in the 1950s. It was the golden age. I was here in the 80s. They'll never replicate that. I actually have had people who moved here in 2014 and 2015 say, remember all those mom and pop stores on Main Street? I said, no, in 2000, people were talking about the loss of mom and pop stores. But that's something I have to keep reminding myself, that everybody's Westport is different.
Great point. Great point. So are there any particular stories, if you will, over the years that have stuck out to you and you still think about those today?
There's all the controversies. Right now, the YMCA moving out of Westport, turning the Three Bears into Chabad, all kinds of housing controversies and 830G controversies. The things I think that I'm most proud of are a couple. Being able to shine a light on kids doing great things. Not necessarily the valedictorian, not the star athletes, but the people the kids who quietly do something, whether it's in school or out of school, that I can give them their 15 minutes and their photo and have people comment. The other one is when there's a natural disaster or any kind of disaster. Isaias, Superstorm Sandy, when I'm able to provide information and a way of people getting together. And then the real tragedies, Max Harper, the Staples High School senior who was killed in September, giving the town a way to get information and share information and grieve together. That's, to me, the value of what I do.
Right. So I want to be respectful of our time, but I think we're in pretty good shape.
This is fun.
So what's the future for 06880?
The future is...
The blog, not the zip code.
Right. It's a great question. I love what I do, and I love being able to do it. I love the fact that right now, as we're talking, I have a fantastic Staples intern named Catherine Phelps, who is doing wonderful work. And I love being able to mentor the interns that I've had. I would love to be able to get a couple of staffers, a couple of people who can cover the meetings that I can't. It's got a great social media guy young guy who lives in Weston named Thomas Saramaniake, who has really kicked up our social media presence. I don't know what's around the corner. I don't know what, the next technological innovation is. We added this podcast a couple of years ago. We've got video now. I don't know what's ahead other than I'll find out and I'll try to figure out how to do it. And the more people can keep hounding me and telling me what I'm doing right and wrong, that's the way 06880 will continue to evolve and grow.
And if you, looking back with 2020 hindsight, are there things you wish you'd done differently or would do differently if you had the chance?
Not too many. Not too many. There's a couple of stories that I have done in the past that I did without really doing enough background checking. They're no longer available because I've deleted them after hearing from readers. I've learned to check a little more than I did when I started out. The platform, the WordPress platform, turned out to be fantastic. It's very flexible and robust. The name that I chose, the tagline that I chose, it was all happenstance. And I've been very lucky. I was lucky that my parents moved to Westport in 1956 on the advice of my father's friend, Rod Serling of Twilight Zone fame. Was so fortunate to go to Staples High School. Lou Gehrig said when he was dying, and I'm not dying, but I'm the luckiest man alive.
Yeah. If you sort of take a step back from 06880 and the comments as we discussed, and I know you just joined the Common Ground Initiative Committee, I'd be interested in your take on sort of the level, both in terms of amount, quantitative and qualitative, the intensity of the public discourse in general in Westport, having grown up here and been involved in the community all along the way.
Yeah, it's polarized here. I did not think it would seep down to Westport, but it really has. I have been blamed, possibly rightly, possibly wrongly, for contributing, to some intense discussions. That's why, again, I try to moderate the comments while giving people a voice. But I think that's also part of what Westporters care. They care about their town. They care about their schools. They care about their politics. They care about their homes. They care about their beach. They care about their downtown. They care about their Saugatuck. They care about everything. I hope I can give people a voice to talk about those things. I hope I can shine light on some of those things. I hope I don't inflame passions unnecessarily. But enough people have told me that they are thankful that there is this way that they can get information and that they can share their thoughts. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep making mistakes. I hope I make fewer mistakes than correct judgments. And I hope that people keep reading.
You may have answered my next question, which was, you talked about what's next for 06880, what the future is. What's the future for Dan Woog?
I'm going to keep getting up in the morning. I'm going to keep writing. I'm going to keep reading my emails. I'm going to keep going to the Y. I'm going to keep taking advantage of everything that Westport has, from the libraries to the restaurants, to whatever comes in Saugatuck. I'm going to keep appreciating this town and hoping that others appreciate it too. And beyond that, when we're finished, I'm going to have to figure out the next couple of stories.
So, well, let me just say that. Here's another question I had for you. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to recall that a few years ago you decided you needed to remind people about the tone of some of the comments, and it wasn't you reminded people about it's no longer anonymous, but you also I think had a little bit to say about let's tone it down a little bit. Was there something in particular that brought that on, or just you could see a drift in that direction?
Yeah, I can't remember anything specific, but we're a town. We're a small town. We're a great town, but we're all in this together. It is our town. You live next to somebody who loves the community gardens, and next door to that is somebody who really believes that, the best thing there is an athletic field. And then the person next to that says, but what about the kids? We need an elementary school. So when it gets a little too intense, I try to remind people, and I know that, 6 months from now, there'll be some other intensity.
So what have I not asked you that I should have asked?
You're great. You can take over my job.
No way, Dan.
You're a great interviewer.
No way.
And it's been, that's one of the things. I've gotten to know you over the last few years, and there's so many other interesting people to meet. So I'm going to deflect that question, hopefully as best I can.
All right, Dan. Thanks very much for letting me do this. It's been a blast.
It's fun being in this seat, and next time I'm going to be back in your seat.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Steve.